Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bible Nerds podcast. Joining me today is Tisha and Kuyaman. I just did that intro exactly how my dad does it.
Hello.
Hello there.
Hello, Ben.
I miss my dad. He's been gone for a week and he'll be gone for a couple more weeks. But we're here. We're ready to do some Bible nerding. And we're in the middle of the book of Numbers.
Yeah.
I'm really excited. So we're going to be talking about Numbers chapter 16. And Kuyaman was the one who did the research for this talk. And it's pretty intense.
Yeah. Very intense. Very intense.
Get your popcorn's ready.
Yeah. This is, I feel like this is the one example of the Bible, of how the Bible can be like a drama queen or feature drama queens.
Yeah.
But it's super cool. And it ties in with the storyline that we've been following about how these humans that God chooses to work with don't want to work by God's rules, God's way of loving your neighbor and loving God. And so why don't we just get into it?
Yeah, for sure. So far in the story, diba, we've been tracking that Israel is the people of God on the move here in the book of Numbers. So they're traveling from Mount Sinai all the way to the promised land. And one of the things that we see is that there's this constant tension between God inviting his people to know him and to obey him, contrasted with his people rebelling over and over and over in different ways. And we started that last session, right? Last talk is when we talked about the spies.
Yeah.
So we talked about the rebellion of the people when the spies gave a bad report. Now we're going to talk about a specific group this time within the people of Israel. And this rebellion was led by a guy named Korah.
Yeah. And Korah. A bunch of his friends.
Korah and friends. Yeah. This is not Korah as in Legend of Korah.
Oh, man.
This is something else.
Sounds like something Korah would do, though, in season 1.
That's so true.
She did have a rebellious spirit.
She had a rebellious spirit.
Yeah. So what we're going to do for this episode, we're going to spend most of our time going through chapter 16. And I think the most logical way to go through it is to trail it part by part.
Right.
Okay, so let's read the first few verses. Numbers chapter 16, verses 1 and 2. Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and some Reubenites, Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, took action, and rose up against Moses. With them were some people of Israel, 250 leaders of the assembly, well known in the assembly of men of renown. So here we are introduced to the group, Korah's group.
Yeah.
Right? I'm using Korah as to represent the entire group. But you have Korah's group, you have these two guys, Dathan and Abiram, you have On. They were specifically mentioned. And then aside from them, you have 250 leaders of the assembly. So they weren't just
regular people.
They weren't just tribe members. They were leaders.
Yeah.
They were important. And Korah himself, we'll find this out as we go, also is not a regular person. I mean, he has a special assignment.
Yeah, he's a Levite.
It's mentioned here that he is a son of Levi. He was a Levite. We mentioned this in the previous episodes also, that the tribe of Levi was set apart by God in his people. They were not counted among the 12 tribes. Because the 12 tribes, yung mga binilang, diba, what were counted were the people who could fight, the able-bodied men. Right? And so the tribe of Levi was not counted among the 12. The tribe of Levi was not supposed to fight.
Yes.
One of the things that we will see also is that the tribe of Levi, they had certain privileges, but they also had
a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. And so we know them as the tribe that was assigned specifically to care for the tabernacle. So that is the tribe where Korah belongs. But within the tribe of Levi, we also have subgroups.
Yes, the Merarites.
So we have the Kohathites, we have the Gershonites, and we have the Merarites.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember those names, so let's just focus on the Kohathites. So basically these were different people in charge of the different parts of the tabernacle.
Yeah.
So you have the Merarites who were in charge of caring for and moving the heavy objects.
Yes.
Remember, they were a people on the move, so
Yeah.
they were the people who were setting up and
Yeah.
packing up
Yep.
every time
Yep, yep,
the
yep.
presence of God
The
would
That's right.
visit them.
logistics team.
Logistics team, yeah,
Yeah.
everyone knew they would bring out the chairs
Yeah.
and so on. And so the Merarites were in charge of the heavy objects,
The beams and the
the beams, the pillars, the
foundation.
bars.
Yeah, right.
The Gershonites were in charge of curtains
Right.
and coverings, stuff like that. And the Kohathites,
They
which
were
is
carrying the
where
holy stuff.
Korah
Interesting.
belonged to, they were in charge of the most sacred objects.
Thank you for pointing that out. That's really I didn't notice that when I was reading number 16. He's part of the group that carried the sacred furniture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
So the tribe of Levi was special. But
But
even within the tribe of
Kohathites
Levi,
were like extra
Yeah.
because they're carrying the showbread table.
yeah,
And they're
yeah.
carrying the are they the ones who carry the ark? Or is it the priests who carry the ark?
I think it was the priests who covered it.
But they carry the ark.
They carried it. They weren't
Wow.
allowed to touch it unless it was covered.
Yes, that's right.
But they were the ones
That's
who
right.
brought it from
So
one place to
interesting.
another.
So this is about the rebellion of the people within the people within the people.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's interesting about this rebellion is that one of the things that they point out is how come we're not even more chosen? We're part of the chosen people.
Right.
The chosen group, subgroup within the chosen tribe.
Yeah, they have like
Within
a
the
lot
chosen
of
people.
Yeah, it's like they have like the membership card, like the
Yeah, yeah.
the Manam. What do you call it? The bistro group. card.
Bistro card.
That's our membership card.
Yeah, like they get like the 10% discount.
Yeah.
But they wanted 20% discount.
Yeah, because there were some people,
They wanted
a
the free
smaller
stuff.
group of people
Yeah,
who had that discount or had that
see.
those
which was
privileges.
Moses and Aaron.
Which was Moses
Yeah.
and Aaron. So
Right.
in verse 3 of chapter 16, it says, They gathered together against Moses and Aaron and said to them, You have gone too far. The whole assembly is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is in their midst.
Yeah.
Why then do you exalt yourselves above the assembly of the Lord?
Which is kind of true. Like what he's saying is not completely false. Like God told them in Sinai that you will be for me a kingdom of priests and
Yeah, holy
a
nation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so he's using that bit, but he kind of like in a way he sees Moses and Aaron as like an extra. Almost as if we're holy and Moses and Aaron is not holy. Like we want to supersede or yeah
Aren't we all holy?
yeah
Hindi ba anak tayo ng just
Yeah.
like?
yeah.
What makes you think that you're so special? Like, what
Exactly.
makes you think
Exactly.
that you
So
could do
in a
this
way,
and that?
he's kind of like denouncing or diminishing the specialness of Moses.
Yeah. Which is interesting.
This reminds me of Adam and Eve in the garden, where they're like, yeah, we can eat from any tree.
Right.
Yes, we are already an image of God.
Yeah.
But they wanted more.
They wanted more.
And I felt like it was just something like that.
Right.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
were already holy.
Yeah. Definitely. I feel like that's built into it's echoing that tension.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so if you were preaching from this, diba? If you were trying to look for some sort of practical pastoral
Something about
application.
jealousy.
Yeah, something about envy, something
Yep.
about how
Yeah.
being too focused on like what you are not called to
Yeah.
might cause you to miss what you were called to.
The grass
Right.
is always greener on the
Grass
other
is
side.
always greener on the other side.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we'll see is that, isa yun, yung sinabi mo, the grass is always greener on the other side. But on the other side, the other thing that will happen later on is they will start looking back to their past,
Right.
thinking that it was the glory days, thinking that
Right.
things were better back then. Can't we just go back to the things,
Right.
the way things are?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that sounds familiar for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think the other element, the other dimension, you mentioned Genesis 1. I think there's a lot of Genesis 4 hyperlinks that are
Oh,
going on.
yes.
Because this is a story of sibling rivalry.
Oh, yeah.
Moses and Aaron are also sons of Levi.
Yeah.
right? So this is their cousins telling Moses and Aaron, "Why are you special over all the other
Right.
cousins?"
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
So this, I mean, so Genesis 4 is the story of Cain and Abel,
Yes.
right? Where God chooses Abel's offering, right? They're brothers, but God chooses one of the brothers' offering, and that upsets Cain,
Yep.
right? And God asks Cain in the story, why are you downcast,
Yeah.
right? If you do what is right, if you do what is good, won't you be lifted up in due time, right?
Yep.
But for some reason, or well, maybe not some reason, for typical human reasons,
That's not what Cain does.
that we get so upset when somebody else, especially someone close to us, is lifted up over ourselves. Even if the truth, the thing that Korah said is true, that every person in the Israelite camp is holy,
That's right.
and they all have a special role in the community.
Yeah.
But sometimes I guess we can look at other people and feel that we're not as special.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's falling into the lie that the serpent actually wants us to fall for.
And we're actually gonna see how that story ties up with this story, but later on. We'll mention it later.
Yeah, I think we'll see how this is really just sort of amplifying Genesis 1, Genesis 4.
Yeah.
On
Okay.
steroids.
Okay.
There's that saying, right, na how do you build the tallest tower in the city?
Right.
You either work harder than everyone else has worked,
Right.
or you tear down all of the other tall towers.
Yeah. Crab
So that
mentality.
what remains is yours.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. And so, yeah, what we see here is, I think it was in talk 1 or talk 2 when we talked about how there were layers, right, within the Israelite community. When they would set up, you have the tabernacle in the middle, you have the priests there, you have the Levites surrounding the tabernacle, and then only then do you have the
Tribes.
Israelites, the
rest of the 12 tribes.
the rest of the 12 tribes. Last time we talked about the rebellion of the people,
Yes.
of the Israelites. The 12 tribes represented by the 12 spies,
Yeah.
and how they wanted to go back to Egypt.
Right.
Now we're talking about the next layer, the Levites, the rebellion of the Levites, the infighting within them. And then in the next session, we're going to talk about an even inner circle, which is the priests,
Yeah.
the failure of Moses and Aaron. So later on, we will see them fail. But this is not where it's
Not
at yet.
Yeah.
Ayun. I just think that there's value in pointing that out, that layer.
Because it might
going
feel
in.
repetitive. Like,
Another one.
another rebellion,
Yeah, I
another
get it.
failure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the story is like the way that Tim Mackey describes it in the Bible Project podcast is it's like the wheels have gone off the car. Like it starts off smoking, and then like there's engine problems, and then like at the end of chapter,
Just gets worse and worse.
the wheels have just like fallen off.
Yeah. I think I included this in my write-up. That I have a suspicion that the author of Numbers intended it to feel that way. That,
right.
na naman, like, talaga, and then you go another, and go another, and you go another, and then it gets tiring to kind of give you an idea also of what Moses
or
would have
how God
felt like,
felt.
and what God felt. Yeah, an extension, of course.
Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, there's seven stories of rebellion in the book of Numbers, and we just cycle around the outer layer, the middle layer, and the inner layer.
Yep.
Like it's just going around and around.
Yeah. Okay, so now we have the rebellion of Korah and his friends, right? So they were talking about how Moses were exalting themselves. How does Moses respond? Okay, in verses 4-7, it says, when Moses heard this, he fell on his face. Parang masakit yun. And he spoke to Korah and his company, saying, tomorrow, the Lord will reveal who belongs to him and who is holy when he allows him to approach him. He will allow the one whom he has chosen to approach him. Do this. You and Korah and all his followers are to take censers before the Lord and put fire and incense in them. The man whom the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far,
Interesting.
you Levites.
That's what Korah told him. You've gone too far.
Yeah.
But now Moses kind of flipped it around.
Yeah, Moses says, no, you have gone too far.
I'm telling you, this is like the chapter of drama queens. Oh, but what's interesting is the language I'm reading here from NIV is the one who he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses, he will cause to come near him. This is the Leviticus language of drawing near, coming near to God.
Yeah.
The one that God chooses is the one who is able to draw near.
Yeah. And this test, diba?
Yes.
Basically, Moses devises a test to determine sino ba talaga pinili ni Lord? Who has God chosen? Are you right in saying that we are exalting ourselves unfairly? And so he asks them to bring incense.
Yes.
Bring fire.
Yes.
Which is interesting, right? Because that is part of the role of the priest.
Yes.
Right? The part of what the priest would do is bring incense before the presence of God.
That's right.
So you have that playing. Kumbaga, the idea is, if you think this is what you're called to do, why don't you try it out for yourself?
Yeah.
So you have that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think what's very interesting about this is that we also have a very recent story wherein you have people who brought incense before God's presence
and they exploded
in a wrong manner, in an unworthy manner.
They spontaneously combusted.
And they died. They were set on fire. We talked about this in Leviticus.
Yes, exactly. This is Leviticus. It's reminding us, like the language, the censers, the fire, coming near, drawing near. This is all Leviticus.
Yeah.
I also think that it's interesting that the way that Moses is developing the thought is he's not just saying that Moses has made himself special, or sorry, he's not saying that Korah's complaint is that Moses and Aaron have made themselves special. It's that they've set themselves up in the position as the leader or the king without God's anointing or appointing. When clearly multiple times throughout the storyline, God has spoken of Moses as his servant, as his representative. To listen to Moses, right? That's what happens in Exodus. Like he speaks from the mountain and he says that you should listen to Moses. But it seems that at the heart of it, Korah thinks that Moses like sort of placed himself there in that position as leader. So why can't we just like take that?
Yeah.
So it's the human condition, the how we want to step up and sort of like advance in our own abundance and position,
and to not trust in God's wisdom,
even if it means at the expense of other people.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's kind of wild if you contrast this with Exodus 3, where God calls Moses to the burning bush.
That's right.
Tries to send him to Egypt, and then Moses gives reasons why he's not the right guy.
Right.
So he's not exalting himself there.
Yes.
Right?
That's
and then you also have moments in Exodus where God calls the people to go to his presence, but they don't want to because they were scared.
But Moses goes
on their behalf. And so you have these moments in the past where you kind of also see that Moses is there.
So far in the story, Moses has mediated on behalf of the people.
Many times.
Twice. That God was like so frustrated with the Israelites that he was going to sweep them all away. But Moses puts himself in between God's justice and God's mercy.
Yeah.
And he offers his own life in place.
Yeah.
So we can see that Moses, while he is not a perfect leader, he is painting sort of the picture of what kind of what does it take for a human to partner with God. It's somebody who doesn't take to advance, but instead he lays down his life on behalf of the many.
Yeah. And so in the next portion that we will read, we see here what we've mentioned a while ago, that Korah and the tribe of Levi, in extension, they also have a special assignment. And so in chapter 16, verses 8 to 11, it says, "Then Moses said to Korah, 'Hear now, you Levites, is it not enough that the God of Israel has set you apart from the assembly of Israel to bring you unto himself, to minister in the tabernacle of the Lord, and to stand before the assembly serving them? He has brought you and all your brethren, the Levites, unto himself, and still you seek the priesthood too?
Yeah.
For this, you and all your company have gathered together against the Lord. Who is Aaron that you should complain about him?
Yeah.
So Moses brings it up to God.
Right.
Your fight here is with the Lord, not with Aaron.
Yep.
And he points out, right, what we've been talking about, that you have a role. You have your assignment. We were given our
You have a
assignment
10%
also.
discount card.
Yeah, it's different, but that
Yeah.
if we're talking about
Yeah.
the value of these human beings, right? If we're talking about dignity,
It's not lesser in any
yeah,
way.
it doesn't mean that I'm superior to you in terms of my value.
No.
It's just that I was given a different call by the Lord.
Yes. And now they're trying to usurp both.
Yeah.
Which is like why you were saying what you were saying, Tish. It's like Adam and Eve trying to be God. They're already
Not
like
enough.
they're already like God, but they're trying to be God by redefining good and evil for themselves.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And this goes well with some of the things that Paul says in the New Testament when he talks about how we are the body of Christ, many parts, one body.
Yeah.
The foot shouldn't say to the arm, I don't need you, and so on and so forth.
I don't need you, foot. I can walk on a handstand. Anyway.
I wish I could walk on a handstand.
Okay.
Okay, so let's read.
I love the response of Dathan and Abiram.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's read that. Are you referring to the next verses?
Yeah, verse 12.
Okay, verse 12 and to 14.
Yeah.
Then Moses summoned Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. They responded, "We will not come up. Is it not enough that you brought us out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert? Now you are going to make yourself a prince over us. Indeed, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey, nor have you given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Are you going to gouge out the eyes of these men? No, we will not come up."
That's so insane. That's so insane because they're putting on its head God's promise that he was going to deliver them out of a land of slavery into
a land of
milk and honey. But for Dathan and Abiram, they're looking back at Egypt. This is what you were saying a while ago. They're looking back at Egypt as a land that was flowing with milk and honey.
Right.
And Moses had just brought them to the wilderness to die.
Yeah.
Like, moreover, you haven't brought us like you haven't showed us these gardens or milk and honey that you were talking about. Like
this is one step worse than what happened last time. Because last time they just wanted to go back. And they were talking about how there was food there, we were comfortable. They forgot about their slavery, so that was that. But here
they did want to stone Moses last time. So
but here what we're seeing is not only are they looking back to their place of slavery as if it was comfortable, now they're thinking that their place of slavery is like the promised land.
Yeah.
Which is like
that's insane.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. You said gouge out your eyes. That what you're reading NRSV?
NCB.
NCB. In NIV, it's, do you want to treat these men like slaves or to deceive these men? I think, although the Hebrew is literally, will you gouge out the eyes of these men? So I think there's something interesting going on there that I don't know. But maybe slaves have their eyes gouged out or something.
Yeah. Or maybe that's meant to be interpretative.
Yeah.
Like, do you think we're blind or something like that?
Yeah. True.
Okay, sige. Let's push on. In verses 16 to 19, it says, "Then Moses said to Korah, you and your company are to appear before the Lord tomorrow, you and them and Aaron. Each of you is to bring your censer and put incense in it."
So the censer is the one we were talking about in Leviticus, where they have like this incense.
Yeah. It's holding the fire.
Chain fire
coal
thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So inulit ni Moses yung test. Yung instructions for the test. To bring censer before the Lord, 250 censers, because there were 250 of them. You and Aaron will also each bring a censer. So each took his own censer, put fire and incense in them, and stood at the entrance of the tent of meeting along with Moses and Aaron. The whole assembly gathered against them at the entrance to the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord appeared to the whole assembly. Ayan na. Makikita na natin kung sino pipiliin ni Lord. And again, I wanna mention that the last time this has happened, there was death.
Yeah.
And I'm mentioning that in order to prepare for what's about to happen next.
Right.
Okay, so what happened? In 20 to 22, the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, "Move away from this assembly so that I can destroy them at once."
Right. So this is what God said during when the spies rebelled. He wanted to. He was just done. He was done with the Israelites. They've gone beyond the line, and because they've rebelled against every single thing that God has called them to. They don't even want it anymore, and so
Even the gifts, even the food.
yeah, and so God wants to wipe out Israel, and Moses intercedes on their behalf. Moses intercedes, telling God to stay faithful to his character, right? Because God is the way that God introduced himself to Moses is a God who is slow to anger and full of loving
Abounding.
kindness.
Yeah.
And he is just, but between the two things, right? This is the tension that the biblical authors continue to navigate. Anyway, so we're entering into the second time, right? The second time that God wants to, or sorry, this is the third time, because the first time was in Exodus.
During the calf.
During the calf.
Yeah.
So this is the third time that God wants to wipe out the Israelites for their insolence.
Yeah.
Which is uncomfortable, right? But there's Torah here, there's wisdom here.
Yeah.
As we see Abraham, sorry,
Moses.
brain fart. Okay, as we see Moses stepping in again in between that space between the Israelites,
because that's what he does.
Yeah,
that's what he does.
That's what the anointed one, right, of God, the one that God chooses, should be doing.
Yeah. So in the next verse, it says, "But Moses and Aaron fell down upon their faces and said, O God of the spirits of all flesh, will you be angry with the whole assembly
so interesting
because of the sin of one person?"
So that's NCB.
Yeah.
So in NIV, it says, "Who gives breath to all living things." Spirit, right? Ruach.
Yeah.
Ruach.
Yeah.
I think that's a Genesis 1.
Yeah.
Genesis 1 language. Okay, anyway, go on.
So what we see here was what you mentioned about God passes judgment, and then Moses intercedes.
Yeah.
He says, "Will you be angry with the entire assembly when only one man sins?" Right? Because God wants to sweep away the entire Israelite camp. Right? But Moses is putting in this, he's saying that, would you be angry at the whole assembly if only one man sins? Well, technically it was 250 plus the four of them, but like represented as one against the many.
Right.
Yeah, and I think this part is really, it's ingenious.
Yeah.
Right, because what we see is that in the moment of crisis, even when all of these people were criticizing Moses and Aaron for the role that they were given by God, at the most crucial moment, what they do is they still fulfill that role. They still intercede. They still go on behalf of the people before God.
Right.
And vice versa. They were still being priests, even when their priesthood was being questioned.
Moses understood the character of God. I don't think Korah would have done the same if he was. Well, we don't know anything about Korah, but like I don't think Korah would do the same if he was in Moses' place.
Yeah. And then what we see after that is, well, the judgment that is passed. Reading onward, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the assembly, saying, draw back from the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram."
Right.
Then Moses got up and went to Dathan and Abiram, followed by the elders of Israel. He spoke to the assembly, saying, "Draw back from the tents of these wicked men, and do not touch anything that belongs to them, or else you will be swept away in all their sin."
This is Genesis language. These wicked men. This is Noah's flood. Noah's flood.
Yeah.
And do not touch anything.
That's
Right?
tied to
Genesis.
Levitical language also.
Levitical, and
Yeah.
I think Genesis.
Clean and unclean.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. But like the Levitical language goes all the way back to Genesis 3, where they're not supposed to take from the fruit or touch the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and bad.
Right. Sige. Let's continue reading and then
you will
let's explore it.
You'll be
further.
swept away. It's the flood language.
Yeah.
Okay, anyway,
that's
go on.
very cool. Okay, so they backed away from the dwellings of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Dathan and Abiram came out and stood in the entranceway of their tents, along with their wives, their sons, and their little ones. Moses said, "By this you shall know that the Lord sent me to do all these things, for they are not of my own doing." If
It's not
these
my
men,
idea.
if these men end up dying a natural death and are visited by every person's fate, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the earth opens up and swallows them, and all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you will understand that they have treated the Lord with contempt.
Right. So Sheol is
The grave.
the grave, like the
Death.
it is this place of death. If they don't die a natural death, right? Like they grow old and they die.
Which I was thinking, like, how would that happen? Like, they would just grow old in front of the fence because they were asked to
That's also
step
an
out.
unnatural death. No, but I think the way I understand it is like if they don't die here in
Yeah,
this
yeah.
moment,
If
they
nothing
die.
happens.
If they die at a certain point,
Yeah.
But if the ground opens up, in fact, the wording is so interesting. There's so much going on. If the Lord brings about a new creation,
Yeah.
right? A completely new way
Yeah.
of
If he does something new.
yeah. So this is God creating a new way of death. Or this is creation, anti-creation. This is decreation.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, and we've been given the language of the flood, Genesis 3, Genesis 6, right? So I think there's really this really interesting picture of how God's justice is being brought about. Like all these themes and storylines of God's justice happening to these people who choose to choose to
Rebel.
rebel. It's not just. I think what's interesting, it is unsettling. It is very unsettling.
Yeah.
That
This is not meant to be a happy story.
it's meant to induce grief.
Yeah.
It's meant to make you feel upset and disturbed. But something about what these symbols mean is ultimately God will confront a culture that has steeped itself in death, that have steeped itself in its pride and ways and a value set that exalts themselves over other people. And ultimately, for God to bring about new creation, he has to confront and get rid of the culture of death. And that's what he does by opening up the ground to swallow them alive. It's insane. But and it's uncomfortable, but that's what we see here.
Yeah. Oftentimes, diba, we quote the verse that says, "The old is gone, the new has come."
Yes.
Yeah. It's not so encouraging if you see it this way.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. But yeah, I mean, this is not, God is not just randomly without like thinking, without like
Yeah, this was not arbitrary. This was not emotional.
Yes.
as
It's
in-
not God being petty.
Yes.
these were the leaders of the community.
Yeah.
If God's chosen people who were meant to be his mediators, a holy nation, right? which is the thing that Korah claims at the beginning. If those leaders of that community rebel and redefine good and evil for themselves, then what would the world look like? What would the community look like? It would be so different from what God intends this community to be. And so like it's different when like in a company, like if one employee does something that isn't, you know, aligned with the values of their company. It's a whole different thing when the CEO tries to get all the board of directors fired, right? That example actually comes from Bible Project.
Yeah.
But that, I think that's what's happening here, where these people, according to Uncle Ben, you know, with great power comes great responsibility, choose to reject the responsibility and in fact try to usurp more power. This is a dangerous formula. And God's people cannot be in this way.
Yeah. There's a higher standard.
There's a higher standard.
To whom much is given, much is also asked.
And so God matches the judgment. He matches the level of their responsibility and their position with equally intense judgment.
Well, one of the things that I pointed out also in my write-up is that we're not here to justify the deaths as if it's fine. Like, as if
we're
Korah
not saying,
deserved it.
We're not saying that.
That's not what we're trying to say at all. This is meant to be reflected upon. This is meant to be meditated upon.
Yes.
Wrestled with even. But one of the things that I think is important to point out also is that this is not an isolated event.
Yes. No.
This is not the first time. I mean, we've talked about all of the other times that this has happened.
Yeah.
This is not as if parang...
The snowball has rolled into a massive...
hindi siya parang nagkamali lang ng isang beses tapos galit na and so on. No, this is something that has been brewing. This is something that needed to be dealt with.
The wheels have come off the car.
Yeah. So let's read what happens toward the end.
And here in this place of intense justice, there's also intense mercy that we're going to see.
Yes. So in verses 31 to 35, it says, "As soon as he finished saying these things, the ground split apart underneath them. The earth opened up its mouth and swallowed them, and their households, as well as the men who were with Korah and all their possessions. So they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol, and the earth closed over them. They perished from the assembly. All of Israel that had gathered around them fled at their outcry, for they said, the earth might swallow us up too. Fire came out from the Lord and swallowed up the 250 who had offered incense." So you have the ground swallowing and you have the fire
Consuming.
swallowing also, consuming.
This is really, really heartbreaking.
Yeah. This, I think, is where it might be helpful to point out what you were saying earlier about how there are parallels between this story and the story of Cain and Abel.
Yeah.
Because that phrasing, that the ground swallowing up the people, is the same
Language,
same phrasing of how when God talks to Cain about what he did to Abel, about the blood being swallowed up by the ground. In Genesis 4:11, it says, "Now you are cursed and banished from the ground, which has swallowed your brother's blood."
Right.
It was also an issue of envy. It was also an issue of worship. It was also an issue of brothers. And so you find all of these parallels in the story of Cain and Abel,
Yes.
and in the story of Numbers chapter 16. And what we find is that even in this is what I wrote, even in the chosen people of God's most inner circles, they were still plagued by humanity's broken condition and hardness of heart. They were not ready for the promised land, just as Cain was not ready for Eden.
No. Wow.
Because that was what happened after that. He was
Right.
brought out of Eden.
Right.
He was already out of the garden by this point.
But then he was brought out of Eden.
But
That's
this
right.
was where he was brought out of
Right.
Eden.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Yeah. But it's Torah.
Yeah.
It's wisdom. It's wisdom, and we're supposed to reflect on this. Actually, it doesn't end here, right? On verse 41.
Yeah, there are two more things that happen.
Yeah, after all of this, the whole Israelite community grumble against Moses and Aaron,
Yeah.
right? As if they like every time we hear the word grumble, that's like rebellion brewing, right?
It's blame.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. So it's almost as if like they haven't learned the lesson yet,
Yeah.
right? They're ready to pick another fight
Yeah.
with Moses and Aaron, right?
And it's interesting also how this comes up. So in verse 41, the very next day,
Yeah.
the whole assembly of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron, saying, "You have killed the Lord's people." As if Moses wasn't saying a while ago that God is going to do something. Like if they don't die of natural causes,
Yeah.
God's going to do
Right.
something.
So
And then
they
here they're
completely
saying that
misunderstood the
You
situation.
killed them.
Yes.
Yeah. You killed them. When the assembly had gathered in opposition to Moses and Aaron, they looked up toward the tent of meeting,
Right.
and behold, the cloud covered it, and the glory of the Lord appeared.
Yeah, right.
You have a second time this is happening. This time, 250 are out, and you have the rest of the community
Rebelling, grumbling.
rebelling.
Yes.
Yeah, like what happened last time. And I guess this speaks to what you were saying a while ago, that if the leaders themselves
Yes.
are rebelling,
Yeah.
it follows.
Now all these people want to join in with
Yeah, it can
They
be so easy for it
started.
to just
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, we're nearing the end. Verse 43, Moses and Aaron stood in front of the tent of meeting, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Stand away from this assembly so that I can quickly put an end to them." So similar, very similar to what happened a while ago.
God's ready to wipe them out
Again,
because these people have decided to join the fate of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram.
Yeah.
That they want to continue in this culture of death,
Yeah.
this culture of taking and not trusting in God's wisdom or in God's appointed ones.
so now we're seeing the pattern, right?
Yes.
They're saying the same things.
Yeah.
And so we think, okay, what's Moses going to do next?
Yes.
He's going to do the exact same thing that he has been doing so far. Then they fell down on their faces,
Yeah.
which they've done also a while ago.
Silang na ano, no?
Yeah. Ano kaya skincare nila? And Moses said to Aaron, "Take a censer and put fire from the altar in
This
it
is so
and put
interesting.
incense in it."
Yeah. So Moses is telling Aaron to go do the thing that you're supposed to do.
Yeah, as the priest.
Yeah.
And then what happens next is crazy. "Go out quickly to the assembly to make atonement for them. For anger has gone out from the Lord and the plague has begun." So this time there's a plague happening.
This is the same word in Exodus, the strike. The when God sends the plagues in Egypt.
Yes. So Israel, one of those parallels where we're beginning to see how Israel is kind of like Egypt also in some ways, right?
And God told them that if you don't keep my commands, and then the plagues
Yeah.
of Egypt are gonna.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, go on.
So this was not supposed to be a surprise.
No.
But what I want to focus on is the term that was used, which is to make atonement.
Yeah.
Aaron does the thing of the priest, brings the incense, and he's supposed to make atonement.
Yes.
Something that we talked about in the previous book, in
Yes.
Leviticus,
Yes.
where you're supposed to have 2 goats.
Yes.
One goat is supposed to go away
Yes.
in the wilderness, and
Yes.
one goat is supposed to be
Yes,
killed
that's right.
and to cleanse
Right.
the place and to cleanse
Yes.
the people. Aaron did not have any goats here.
Right. So, what you're saying is Aaron was going to make atonement by offering his life.
That might be implied.
That it seems to be.
Yeah.
Because, like, I'm reading the rest of the text. It says, "So Aaron did as Moses said and ran into the midst of the assembly. The plague had already started."
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is almost like the birds. You weren't there, but when we were recording, we were talking about the only wings, and and as it was in their mouth, they haven't even begun to chew. They get struck by it. So here they're it's the reverse, where they're already being struck by the plague, but Aaron comes in and he stands between the living and the dead,
Yeah.
and the plague stops.
Which is, again, very interesting wording.
Yeah.
He stood between the living
He
and the
puts
dead.
himself in between God's mercy and God's judgment. So this is what we're saying, that
Wow.
after like this intense judgment, we experience God's intense mercy.
Yeah.
That even if the whole company wanted to go down with Korah and to overthrow Moses, like what they wanted to do previously during the story about the spies, even if this was the second time,
Yeah.
Moses and Aaron come before God and they understand the character of who God is. That God is just looking for a human partner, even just one, that will live by his way and live by his value set, which is loving others.
Yeah.
And laying down your life on behalf of the many. And so that's what he does. He stands between the living and the dead,
Yeah.
Wow.
and he makes atonement for them.
Makes atonement for the very people who were persecuting him.
Yeah.
Wow.
And like, how
Sounds
can you not
familiar.
think of how could you not think of
I mean, so
you know who?
that's what we have here in Numbers. Like, so I know this is kind of probably what you're thinking is, why are we reading the book of Numbers? I feel like that's something my dad would say at this point, right? Because it's intense, it's dark. Maybe can't we just skip to the Jesus part?
Yeah.
However, this is exactly why we need Jesus.
Yes.
And what Numbers is doing is it's painting this portrait of what kind of human we need. We need somebody like Moses, like Aaron, right? But a greater than Moses and a greater than Aaron,
Yeah.
right? The next story, which we'll cover in the next episode, is about how Moses and Aaron fail, right? But herein there's shining moments where Moses and Aaron intercede, even for people that want to kill them.
Yeah.
Right, we're seeing the kind of picture of what kind of human God is looking for, that God can partner with to bring about new creation.
Yeah.
Right, and we see the prophets, like later on in the rest of the Bible, the prophets talking about this person, right, who is a combination of Moses, of Aaron, of David, of Noah, of Abraham, right. And just painting this picture of the suffering servant who lays down his life for the many. And so when Jesus comes into the picture, he believes that he is all of that, right? He believes that he's that person who fulfills that role. And so that's why when we get to the Passion Week, he does what he does. He stands between the living and the dead. And he says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Right.
While they were crucifying him.
And he makes atonement by offering his life on behalf of the many, to open up a way to new creation.
Yeah. The good news is so good because we know how bad the bad news gets.
Yeah.
Right.
And in this last part also of when Jesus was about to give his life, if Aaron made atonement for the people without goats,
Yes.
what Jesus does is he celebrates the Passover without a lamb.
Yes.
That's what we find
Wow,
in Jesus.
that's really good.
Because
That's really good.
Jesus is the lamb.
Yes.
And that is what we hear John the Baptist saying from the very beginning of the Gospel of John. Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world.
I'm just like thinking out loud. It's interesting that whenever Moses and Aaron lay down their life, God doesn't take it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, logically speaking, if Moses putting himself in the place of an atonement sacrifice, right? Like why doesn't God kill Moses and then like let the Israelites live, and then like for the rest of the story is the Israelites commemorating Moses in memory of Moses. That's not what happens, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, we see this time and time again, that whenever a human chooses to lay down their life, God lifts it up, right? Versus what we see with Korah, who's trying to elevate their own name
Yeah.
and their own status. And they get the
Yeah.
they get the opposite of what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Right. But with Jesus, the interesting thing is Jesus actually offers his life. And his blood becomes the cleansing and atoning
Yeah.
liquid.
Yeah. Going back to what was said in Numbers,
Yeah.
God did a new thing,
Yes.
Yes.
but it wasn't a new thing of death, it was a new thing of life.
Yes.
In the case of Jesus, he did die.
Yes.
He did
Yeah.
receive the killing blow,
Yes.
but it did not end there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God did a new thing on the other side
which
of death,
was resurrection.
which was resurrection.
And that's our hope.
Yeah.
that's why we're all here. Super cool. I hope you guys were able to follow along with today's episode. I know it was a lot.
A lot of reading.
A lot of reading. But I there was something really cool with how we actually read the text. You feel the power and the
Intensity of the
tenacity
events.
of the text.
Yeah.
Right? The story is really meant to compel you and draw you in and mess with you.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe something to think about is, and because it's one thing to like look for points in the story where and then insert pastoral comments, right? Or
Right.
trying to, or no, that's what I think preachers tend to do. But if you're a regular person just reading the Bible, maybe it's like you're trying to look for pearls to grab,
Yeah.
little stuff to.
Inspiration.
Yeah, I don't think yes, in many ways the Bible can inspire us, but when you're reading, number 16, you're like, well,
This is also the Bible.
it's not very inspiring, is it? But what we're trying to do, and the point of these episodes, right? The reason why we're studying Numbers is if we kind of put away that thinking, we're trying to find pearls in this. Like we read it, we allow the text to disturb us. And then we see the portrait that's being drawn of an anointed one who steps between the living and the dead, right? And then we sit with it. We sit with Korah's rebellion. We sit with the failure of the community to see what God is actually doing, and we meditate on that.
Yeah.
Like from there, there's so much that there's so much wisdom that speaks to us, because then we can start thinking, in what ways are we like Korah?
That's right.
And in what ways have we chosen to elevate ourselves over other people? Like you're not going to see that automatically until you allow this story to draw you in, and to show us our need for Jesus.
That's
that
right.
Jesus shows us that there is another way. That even if we lay down our lives to the point of death, that God will lift us up in due time. That we don't need to assert
Exalt
or
ourselves.
take or exalt ourselves. That God honors the ones who
Lay down their life.
lay down their life. And it's difficult to believe in, because this is the opposite of the storyline of the world. But that's what the Bible is. It's giving this alternate view of how life should be like. And that is the beauty of number 16.
Yeah.
It's not clean. It's not inspirational, at least by the top 10 inspirational book
No.
Yeah.
top 10 inspirational book standards. But in a different way, it offers us wisdom. And I hope you learned something from today's episode. We'll be, if you're ready for more, we'll be back for more as we cover Moses and Aaron's failure in the next episode. Thank you.